Hello and welcome back to Art Masters with me, Mrs. Portilla. Today we are going to be doing work just like Paul Cezanne. He had a very interesting way of seeing things in nature as basic shapes. Just like this still life of fruit, a still life is non-living objects. He simplified the shapes, but they're still geometric shapes. Or like in a landscape that's realistic, you'll see that instead of making things perfectly shaped, a mountain might just be a simple triangle. So today we're going to be doing a simplified landscape like Cezanne using soft shapes and colors. A little bit abstract, but we're going to be focusing more on the shape and the color instead of the realism in a landscape. And just like this landscape here, you'll see the softness of the clouds. That's what we're going to be focusing on. The softness of the shapes themselves, and the color. So let's go ahead and get started on our landscape with Cezanne. So to get started on our Cezanne landscape, we're just going to clear our space. So as we learned from our slides, Cezanne painted things he saw as simple shapes. So if we were going to paint a mountain in 3-dimension, we would probably paint it as a cone. But if we're painting it in 2-dimension, we would paint it as a triangle. So those are the shapes we're going to be thinking of as we're creating our landscape today. So think about a landscape of just a mountain and a sky. So here's kind of some examples. You could see this person's sky has the long, torn shapes for the sky. These long, organic or curvy shapes for the sky. So we're going to be thinking about landscape and background as we do this. So think about the background of a sky. It should be light blue. Maybe we'll leave some white of our paper. We're going to be making soft shapes for our sky, just like the soft clouds. So our torn edges are going to kind of be like the edge of our cloud. So to tear, we're just going to take our tissue paper, and depending on the thickness will be up to you. I'll pinch with my thumb, and then I'm going to pull. I don't really want it to be straight, so I'm actually going to pull down on this one. So I have a nice big shape, and I'm going to keep that. This one, maybe I'll tear from the other side, and I'm going to pinch a little bit less. And I want to make this skinnier, and I'm pulling towards me. You see how I'm not just pulling straight? I'm actually kind of pulling at a diagonal, and I'm going slow. But when you look close at these torn edges, they're nice and soft, just like the clouds in a soft sky. So let's take a little bit of time, and we're going to take our light blue paper, and we're going to tear it in different ways. If you want a point, you would just kind of pinch the edge there, and then pull down to get a nice thin size. So you're going to want to tear your blue paper with different shapes and widths. Okay, so everyone should have some of their light blue shapes. That whole page should be kind of torn. So now we're going to get our little 6x9 white piece of paper. And we're going to get some starch. So we're going to get this little cup, and we really only need just a really small amount of starch. We don't use a lot. It's almost like we're using it like glue and water. And first, I'm actually going to lay out my design. So watch how I kind of arrange or group together my background. So remember, we're thinking about background. We want this to look like a sky. It's going to be a little bit abstract. We're just simplifying the shapes. So this has my straight edge. So I want to put that at the top. So you'll notice I still have a straight edge there. So what could I do? I could tear it so I don't have that straight edge. And I could put it like that. I don't have to put it all the way across. And then I could take this shape and put it there. So this is why I want to kind of lay out my design. So I can see if I don't like this big straight part, I can hold my finger down and tear it. And I'm going to save that scrap. Okay, we want to leave a little bit of white space. So just watch quickly how I lay out my design. Okay, so I kind of have a layout. I think I want, you gotta decide this is gonna be where your foreground is. So if you want a little bit more sky, you're gonna want your sky to go down a little bit further. And once you have a basic kind of idea, we're gonna start starching these papers down, and then we can add as we go, and we're gonna be thinking about overlapping. So as you watch how I think about overlapping and leaving some white space. And I'm actually going to leave some of my pieces there, and I'm gonna dip my starch. And I'm using my newsprint, I don't need a lot of starch, and I'm going to paint right over my shape. Another way to do this is you could take your piece and you could kind of just starch it as it's on the newsprint, and then you're going to use your fingers. This is a little messier way of doing it. Tap with your brush. But I kind of prefer this way where I just lay the pieces, and right before I stick it down, I might adjust my piece. So go ahead and lay out your sky. Feel free to tear some of these pieces and move them as you go. And you're just gonna dip a little bit in the starch and just paint right over. And again, if one of your pieces, if you wanna paint it on your newsprint and then stick it, you could do that. But the easiest way is just leaving that little piece on. Okay, so excellent job. So we should all have some light blue shapes down with our starch, and you'll see I have some on the edges. So there's two ways to solve this problem. We could just cut them off once it's dry, or we could just fold them over and stick them onto the back. So whatever you're comfortable with, you could fold them over and starch them. You could tear them off if you feel comfortable tearing, or we could cut. Okay, so remember, we can always add more if we need to, but now we're still thinking about the background, and you may have this light peach color. So sometimes you'll notice when the sun is setting, you'll start to see like an orange or a pink tint to the clouds. So I'm gonna tear a couple of my pink. Okay, so that was a horrible tear, but guess what? It might make a really interesting shape for me. So I'm gonna roll with it. So let's just tear a couple of the pink paper, thinking about soft cloud background shapes. Okay, so once you have a couple of the pink, if you want to overlap some of these pink shapes into your sky, you may do so. You don't have to. If you're happy with your sky, you can leave it alone and you'll just wait for the foreground step. But I'm going to add a little bit of these nice light pink or peach colors to my background. And again, I'm trying to keep it horizontal and soft, just like the sky. Feel free to just set it down to lay out your arrangement. And then once you're happy with it, just go ahead and paint that starch right over it. And then you can fold or tear any of the overlapping edges off the side. Okay, so we should have our sky, which is a nice light background, nice and soft, and maybe you added a little bit of pink, which just adds a little bit more color. Now let's move on to our foreground. So we have our background, which is behind, and our foreground, which would be in front. What shapes or items are foreground? Hills, grassy areas. So we're going to be thinking about more deeper colors and a little bit brighter colors because it's closer to us. When things are closer to us, it's a little bit more in detail and darker. So let's think about, maybe we're going to do some green grass. Maybe it's like some yellow and green pieces. So we're going to tear some of our brighter, more vibrant colors. Maybe it's pointy triangular mountains. So we're still tearing the shapes, but we're just going to be thinking about something like this with a point. So I'm going to be thinking about mountains and grass as I tear my shapes. Are they rolling hills that are rounded, or are they more jagged like cliffs? So these are kind of abstract but simple shapes. So let's kind of tear our darker papers, orange or green or yellow. Okay, once you have your shapes torn out, let's do the same thing. We're gonna lay them out in a design. When you overlap the shapes, you're gonna get a different color, maybe a richer color. And again, feel free to tear as you go. If this shape, you want it to be shorter, just start in the middle and kind of tear it so it goes in half. And now you have these two beautiful shapes with points, which I love these. Mine is going more towards hills. Okay, I could do the same thing with the orange. Start in the middle, pinch, and then I'm just slowly tearing, kind of guiding my shape. So still abstract. Okay, so you can tear the shapes that you already have torn, and then let's just kind of lay out our foreground, thinking about maybe bringing it up to less than half. Okay, so you'll see I kind of have a layout. It's probably gonna change as I starch these down, but go ahead and start starching down your foreground, which is obviously darker. So now that I'm looking at mine, mine's a little straight. So what if I get rid of that shape? And I just do that. And I'm thinking kind of about balance as well and composition. So that looks a little bit more interesting to me. It's not just a straight line. So be thinking about your composition and more dynamic shapes, what mountains and hills look like, okay? And then we could start starching down. Okay, so excellent job. We should have some of our shapes. If you're not happy with the way that your shape is, feel free to grab one of the extra tissue papers and tear a shape that makes you feel happier. That's maybe more curved. You could also manipulate some of these just by using the bristles of your brush and pushing slightly down. While the tissue paper is still wet, you can kind of move things around a little. If you want to add a little bit of like highlights onto maybe your hills or your mountains, this is optional. Maybe you have a little light yellow piece, or maybe you still have some of the lighter peach. Feel free to tear littler shapes, and maybe you want to add an extra depth of color. But you want to be thinking down here is landscapes, hills, mountains, grass. We're up here with soft sky clouds. This is an optional extension for you guys. If you want to use some scissors, you could still tear. If you're really good at tearing, I love the way the tear looks. But if you want to add more landscape elements, so this would be, you should have a couple of extra unique colors like this blue. And I'm going to cut the shape of a river. Think about the shape. It's like a curved shape, like a river. So maybe you want to add a little bit more identifiable shapes, like a river. What about a pond? Maybe I want to do a tree. Maybe you have some more of that dark green. But it's still a simplified tree, right? So a pine tree or another kind of tree might just be kind of this teardrop oval shape. Maybe a tree is, maybe it's like a pine tree and it's a triangle. So if you want to add some more identifiable shapes, you may do so. Still thinking about landscape, simplified shapes. So those are our final touches. If you feel like your sky needs one more little bit of blue because you have too much white, or maybe you had a nice little bit of yellow and you wanted to add a little sunset, you could just do some minor additions, adding a little bit of highlights, or our fifth graders can add some more realistic looking landscape items using their scissors. Otherwise, when we are finished, we're going to mount it on our paper. So you're going to take your 9x12 paper, we're going to glue this on, and this is where you might need to fix any edges that are sticking out. Just fold them over or carefully tear. So you're going to glue that on, and then of course, as always, you're going to flip it over and put your Cezanne sticker on the back, and you're going to write your name. Great job doing our simplified Cezanne landscapes using simple shapes. Great job today, guys, with your landscape by Cezanne. If you have time to evaluate, you could point out the shapes. Do these look like soft shapes like clouds, the shapes and colors? Maybe you can point out what the landscape looks like to you. Maybe yours is a little more abstract, and you could just point out the colors and the soft shapes and the balance. And I hope you had a good time today doing your landscapes by Cezanne.